Jai Ma Kamakhya, Jai Ma Tara, Jai Bhairava. So today I will start with one question. Uh, in Shakti Upasana, if somebody asks that what is the most powerful scripture, shastra or text in Shakti Upasana, one single text. For example, say in among Advaitins, say the Bhagavad Gita is a text of Vedanta, or for a Vaishnava, the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Vishnu Puran, etc. Similarly, for Shakti Upasana, what is the single most powerful and potent text? Then I think, in my opinion, the answer would be what we know as the Devi Mahatyam or the Sri Chandipaath. What is known in Eastern India as the Chandipaath, same thing as the Devi Mahatyam or the Durga Saptashati. There is no text that is as powerful, uh, as charged as the Durga Saptashati. There are, I mean, innumerable tantras and various other texts, but nothing of this caliber. So we know already, I mean, those who are aware, the Durga Saptashati or the Devi Mahatyam comes from the Markandeya Purana, where there is a certain 13 adhyayas from the Markandeya Purana. So it is basically a part of the Purana, but the same 13 chapters where there is a description which is, divided into three parts, which is called the Charitras, and the three sections which are governed by three of the forms of the goddess Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. They describe the various warrior aspects and how each of these three formations of the great goddess fought against Asuric forces, be it the Madhukaitava in the first chapter, then in the Madhyama Charitra, the second chapter, whose Adhishtatri Devi is Mahalakshmi. She defeats Mahisasura. And then on the third section, where the Adhishtatri Devi is Mahasaraswati, there are Raktavija, Chandamunda, then there is Shumba, Nishumba, all these various Asuric forces are there, and she defeats them one after the other. So the whole text is basically a story of warfare, divine warfare, where the goddess manifests and destroys asuras in different times who have been troubling the gods, other gods, the devas, and humans and earth and everybody else. So that is when fundamentally she manifests on the prayers of the other gods and then destroys these asuras. And there are, along with that, there are stutis in the text where, for example, in the first chapter, we have a very beautiful stuti. Then the fourth adhyaya, Chaturtha adhyaya, has a stuti. And the 11th chapter has a stuti. So these stutis, at the end of it, she promises that whenever there are insurmountable troubles, when there are difficulties, asuric forces, etc., when she's prayed to, she will manifest, and using her infinite amount of powers that she has, she is going to destroy those negative forces and bring victory to the gods and dharma. So this text that comes from the Markandeya Puran, these 13 chapters, uh, are taken out of that. Along with it, there are certain angas or limbs added. For example, there is a Kavach, Kilak, Argala Stotram. Then there are the three Rahasyas that are added. Along with it, there is also the famous Navakshari mantra, the Navarna mantra, which is known as the heart of the Durga Saptashati. These are added. Along with that, there are the Ratri Suktams and other things, and makes this whole text an absolutely potent mantra. It's like every word of the text, even the simple Rishiruvacha, is a mantra in this text when it is done in the right format. And it becomes so potent, so powerful, that there are innumerable tantras that describe the magical benefits that are supposed to be reaped by an upasaka if they are doing the Durga Saptashati or the Chandipaath as per the Vidhanam. That is very important. Randomly, if one reads with bhakti, that is a different thing, though that has its minor benefits. But the moment one starts doing it in a more formatted manner and is guided to do it correctly in the right manner, like when to start, which mantra to do, what are the nyasas to be done, etc., then this whole text becomes a completely charged mantra. It is, in fact, so auspicious and powerful that it is believed that having the Durga Saptashati copy of it, original Sanskrit copy of it, and if you wrap it in red cloth and if you keep it on a simhasana, that is as good as having the goddess of Devi Durga, Devi Chandika in your home, in your puja space. And you can even worship the book. It is that powerful. The number of applications of this is so huge that today almost every single traditional sampradaya, whether they're Vedic or others, they keep on and off doing Chandi homas, which are basically homas from the 700 verses of this text as ahutis for lok kalyanam and various other things. There are tantras that describe that in times of great difficulties, in times of mahamari, in times of warfare, in times of threat to a whole community, etc., then Chandi Upasana and Chandi worship and Chandi homas, etc., should be done. And there are grades of Chandi homas, for example, Navachandi, Shatachandi, like this, Laksha Chandi, takes more effort and time, but the results are very, very strong and palpable. In fact, in Kali Yuga, properly done Chandi Homa and Chandi Upasana is almost matchless. But it has to be done as per the rules and the niyamas, as per the right guidance and following the correct rules, the correct system of Upasana. Then only it becomes a very, very important text. However, uh, for anybody who's interested in knowing more, it is during Navratris, there are a lot of people who chant the Durga Saptashati, which is fine. But again, if you need to do it in the proper manner, if you need to extract the real power out of it, it is important that you have some guidance about this text. How much of the mantra sadhana has to be done? What are the rules to be followed when you are chanting this? What are the krama in which you have to chant the various limbs of the main text? Because these things, the kavacham, for example, is a protection for the upasaka. The argala is a text that very clearly defines that tremendous amount of power that is encoded, tapped, or generated by reading recitation of the main 13 chapters of the text are correctly channelized into a more fruitful and positive direction for the upasaka. Okay, so kilakam is basically ensuring that the energy of the text is concentrated in a certain place. In fact, there is another thing in the text I forgot to mention. This text has a Sapadhara also, which means that basically before you start the text, there's a certain curse that's put on the text, as it is done in many of the mantras in Kali Yuga by Lord Shiva, so that these mantras, these texts, are not misused by people or those who have negative intentions. So the removal of the curse, the Shapadhara, also needs to be done even before one starts the text. However, all said and done, uh, there is absolutely no replica of the Durga Saptashati. The energy that is contained, I mean, it's not just one individual saying or any, I mean, I don't need to give a certificate to the Durga Saptashati. Anybody who has read the Shastras even a little bit would be aware of the amount of praise that the Tantras heap on this particular text and the amount of results they predict that can come for those who do it in the right manner as an anusthana, as a sadhana. Now, listening to this, I'm not encouraging anyone to start reading the Durga Saptashati immediately without any preparation, because that can have some amount of counter effects, in the sense that it is a very, very powerful text, and almost 70 to 80% of the text are descriptions, very graphic and powerful descriptions of warfare that she's engaging in. And not only the goddess, but from her body there is Chamunda that comes out. In the seventh adhyaya, we have the emergence of Chamunda. Then in the eighth adhyaya, we have all the Ashtamatrikas along with Chamunda and the goddess Parvati attacking and destroying Raktavija. There are descriptions as graphic For example, that there are places where there are beating of the drums and the asuras with their heads cut off are dancing to that. There's blood gushing out, there are weapons, there's smashing, cutting. The whole text is a very powerful description of warfare, fundamentally. So, what happens is if you're not prepared mentally and psychologically, and this is why the guidance is necessary for this text, if you enter into reciting this text continuously, it is going to cause that type of an upsurge of energy in your life, in your mind, that causes very naturally, it happens to a lot of people, there'll be a manifestation of anger, very high degree of anger. So that is when you will need to know how to keep that in control so that the energy does not dissipate through anger. It's a very typical thing that happens when the Chandi part is done very properly, vidhivat, furiously, and in a more concentrated manner. That there is always a manifestation of increase of anger in the Upasaka, and that anger needs to be controlled by various methods, and these methods should be taught by a mentor or a guru. Otherwise, what happens is if you just keep doing the reading of the text without following the rules, you are going to, the energy that is going to be created will also dissipate very quickly, and you will not be able to gain the right benefits from it. So when the tantras mention, for example, that doing almost, I think, 10 chandi part properly removes all graha badhas. If you do 100, then you can almost defeat an army, and various other extremely hyperbolic and positive results are promised in the texts when this chandi part is done, the Durga Saptashati part is done. It is assumed that it is done in the correct manner and format. Without that, this text is not going to bring you the results. Without that, ideally, it should not be done. But then there are many people who do it anyway without, without following that rule. I'm not commenting on that at the moment, but unless you follow all the processes, unless you also do the Navarna Japa along with it, and for which you will need to have some Upadesham from somebody, unless you're doing the Navarna Japa and the other processes, the angas, the limbs of that, the energy is not going to get generated in the right manner, and therefore the results that are promised in the tantras will not manifest. So, if somebody is doing the Chandi part and they feel that, oh, this, I'm not getting the kind of benefits that the text is saying, that's primarily because they might not be doing it in the right format that one is supposed to be doing it. On the other hand, if you enter into Chandi Upasana, after knowing all the details in the process, etc., you will see very quickly there is a huge upsurge of power and energy that happens. In fact, uh, it is one of those texts which I would almost say that if somebody were to do 100 Chandi part with the proper process, one Chandi part every day, and if you do it properly, it should take you at least 1.5 to 2 hours with all the japa and everything. At the same time every day for 108 days, almost impossible things can also be manifested through this. But remember, she is a very fierce deity, extremely fierce. She is actually Ranachandi, which is the goddess of war. And within Chandi, there is both Lakshmi, there is Kali, there is Saraswati. Not normal Kali, this is Mahakali. Right in the Pratham Charitra, we have her manifestation as Yoga Nidra, where she allows Vishnu to fight two demons, two asuras, and destroys them. But it is she alone who allows this to happen in a very beautiful stuti that is there in the first chapter. If those who are aware, they will know. So, there is no doubt about it. If there is one text that has to be pinpointed for the Shakta Upasak, then it has to be the Durga Saptashati or the Chandi part. Additional to this, also, apart from worshipping the Pradhana Devata, which is, in fact, once you go into the Rahasyas, the three Rahasyas of the text, you will realize that one of the main deities is the 1800 Mahalakshmi, whose sort of the energy that permeates the whole text from beginning till end, which manifests as Kali as well as Mahalakshmi as well as Mahasaraswati. So there are there are gradations of the deity, gradations of Shakti that you understand in this text, which is exactly what, for example, I have mentioned in other videos with respect to the video where I mentioned about whether you're worshipping a devata or whether you're worshipping a lower entity. So there are gradations of this, of the same deity. There is Mahalakshmi, who is 1800. Then there is Mahalakshmi, which then there is formations of various kinds of Lakshmi that we have. So all these are help the Upasaka to understand that same deity may have a more higher format of the deity at a very higher plane. And that higher format of the deity will have way more amount of potency power and spiritual power, most importantly, more than materialistic power. Materialistic power, there are many other things also that can have. But spiritual power is confined, is accelerated and deepened as we go into the higher formations of the same deity. Similarly, for Mahakali, Mahakali is considered as one of the greatest, perhaps the highest form of Kali, one of the highest forms of Kali. From Mahakali, we have various other, there are so many other forms of Kali we find in Tantras, Siddha Kali, Rakta Kali, this, that, etc. But it is Mahakali who is at a much higher pedestal from there. So these understandings also come to the Upasak when one contemplates on the different aspects and the different deities and the different kinds of Shaktis that I mentioned in Durga Saptashati. So that is why this makes it a very, very comprehensive and powerful text. It is not so much a text of philosophy because Tantra Sadhana and Shakti Upasana is more a practical path rather than a path of very deep theological understanding and nuances. No, its key idea is that you start the practice, you experience it, you refine it, and that energy that you generate through your practice is going to transform you. This is the core idea. In fact, there's one tantra where Parvati is asking Lord Shiva that which among the six philosophies are the six darshanas that we have, which is the right one. And Shiva is saying that those six have been created so that there are people who can keep arguing over them that which is the right one. More important than that is you practice your sadhana, and once you transcend your mind, you see for yourself that what is the right philosophy for you. So with this, I specifically mentioned this particular text because in the last Navaratri, there were a lot of people who were doing the Durga Saptashati, and apart from the sadhanas that I've mentioned, they were also doing Durga Saptashati as a lot of people in India do during this time. But it is good to know that the right method is important, right process is important, and also to take some upadesha from somebody competent, especially with respect to the Navarna mantra, because the Navarna mantra activates, it's like the heart of Durga Saptashati. In order to benefit from it, in order the same 13 adhyas from the Puranas are taken out and made into a powerful mantra by addition of the various limbs, various processes that are there, Nyasa, then Kavacham, the other suttams, etc, and together it becomes a extremely potent uh, like an arsenal of mantras. And this, when done in the right manner multiple times, that is when the benefits that are mentioned in the shastras actually come to upasana. Otherwise, if you do not follow this rule, if you do on your own as it is, then what happens is the amount of energy that you will generate will equally at the same pace will also leave you very quickly, and net result is that you will not uh, have the benefit to the degree and the extent that this text is supposed to confer on an individual. Additional to this, of course, as I mentioned, that this is it contains the power of Kali, it contains the power of Mahalakshmi and Mahasaraswati, and all three of them are warrior deities. So automatically there is an increase in anger that happens in the Upasaka once they start doing sadhana of Durga Saptashati, and that then needs to be managed by a competent guru or somebody who can advise on how to control that process and ensure that the energy does not get lost but is well integrated with the upasaka and helps him or her to go higher with the sadhana. That's all for now. Jai Kamakhya, Jai Matara, Jai Bhairava.